I have the great pleasure right now to introduce our guest speaker. His full bio is in your sermon notes in your bulletin, and I'll just read a few of the highlights. David Loveless is a leadership coach, pastor to pastors, and spiritual advisors to churches and businesses in over 50 countries. He served as the founding pastor of Discovery Church for 29 years. David also serves on the staff of First Baptist Church Orlando as the director of discipleship and leadership development. David and his wife, Caron, are co-founders of Live True Associates, where they coach teams and couples how to live, love, and lead. And they're co-authors of the book, Nothing to Prove. Find satisfaction and significance at the core of your true identity. Pinecrest, let's give a warm welcome to David Loveless.
Thanks. Well, top of the morning to all of you. It's great to see you. Is it okay if I put this down here? Okay, I won't get any feedback from you guys up there. Yeah, everyone can see me just fine. It's so terrific to be back here with you again. I'm really honored that Pastor Scott would invite me to be back. I've been here a couple of times over the last couple of years, and it's just a real joy to be with you again. I'm sure this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Hopefully you know just how privileged you are to have the pastor that you do in Pastor Scott. I've just admired him for years and years and years. He's had such a powerful influence and impact in Central Florida and beyond that. And I love the way he's had such magnificent compassion and heart for the people that seem to get lost in the human experience. But God's heart is absolutely all about. And I know you guys represented that as well, and so it's just great. Let me ask you, do you ever tend to get lost in your everyday human experience? Like where, some days things just seem so absolutely terrific. You go, man, life is good. I'm so glad I'm alive today. And then you have the next day that happens, right? And all of a sudden things aren't going good. Either with you or people around you or the world around you. You go, what in the world's going on? I'm confused. What's happening here? Let me tell you about a guy that lives in Gainesville. And a couple of years ago, an acquaintance, I know his story through an acquaintance of mine. A couple of years ago, he walked out of the house one day and he parked his car out on the street. And he goes in to get in his car and go to work, tries to start, doesn't start, tries, nothing. He goes, what the heck is going on? So he gets out of the car, lifts the hood up, and I wouldn't have known to do this, would I? So anyway, he lifted up the hood, and guess what? The battery was gone. Someone had stolen his battery in the middle of the night. Now, how do you think he felt and viewed life in that moment? Oh, life is so hard. It is so difficult. And I've lost all hope in humanity. That someone could do something like this. So he has to go on to work. He catches a ride and figures he'll come back, and on the weekend he'll get the battery replaced. Well, he comes out of his house the next day, and there's a big note, an envelope on his windshield. And it said, I'm so very sorry, but the other night I was passing by in the middle of the night, headed toward an emergency, and my car died right here. And so I borrowed your battery. And I'm now returning the battery to you. And to thank you for the trouble I put you through, here are a couple of tickets to the Gator football game, next weekend. Now, how do you think he felt about life then? Life is awesome. My hope for humanity has been fully restored. So the next weekend, he goes to the game, and then when he gets home, his entire house has been wiped out. Like someone came in and cleaned him out. There was not a stick of furniture in the house. So the very guy that gave him the tickets then came and borrowed a bunch of other stuff, okay? Now, how do you think he now feels? He's gone from life is good to life is horrible to life is good. Oh, it's horrible again. You ever find that in your human experience where the way you tend to view life, the way you tend to view God, the way you tend to view yourself and others, most often is based upon how the circumstances are going that day. True or false? And every time our circumstances shift to the right or to the left, that's where you and I tend to lose our sense of direction as well as identity. But there's actually a pattern I've discovered. There's actually a blueprint that you can trust, and I believe with all my heart, Jesus Christ came to show us this blueprint. Once you understand this pattern, this blueprint, it can help you in enormous amount of ways, all right? You can actually find yourself, no matter what you're going through, in his blueprint. So, by the way, if any of you get up and leave right now, I'm going to just assume you're going out to check on your battery, all right? John chapter 1. Let's look at the first couple of verses there. In the beginning was the Word. Word was with God, and the Word was God. We're all very familiar with this. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that had been made. Now, you know, if you've grown up in Christian world, you know that in the beginning was the actual Greek word there is the word logos. And most often it's translated word, which is fine. But I want to give you another word that actually is a derivative of the word logos, and it's the word blueprint. I think this might be a little less mystical. The word kind of seems mystical to us, and blueprint can, I believe, be of some help there. So go back and reread it in light of that. In the beginning was the blueprint, and the blueprint was with God. The blueprint was God. That means the very inner reality of who God really is. He pours himself into visible form. Spirit pours itself into matter. And all of a sudden, the divine and the material world are joined together. Jesus came to show us what that pattern looks like. A few chapters over in John chapter 14, it says, or John chapter 1, verse 14, it says, the Word, think blueprint, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. I love the way Eugene Peterson translates this in the Message translation. It says, the Word, blueprint, became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Isn't that what Jesus did? He became flesh and blood, and he just flat out moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish. Jesus came to show us who God really is, not who we thought he was. So here's the way God does this. God's first idea was to take his presence, his Spirit, and to incarnate himself in all of creation. So there's now the creation form of God. Actually, all the time when Crone and I are outdoors, we're reading God's first Bible that he actually wrote, and it's called All of Creation. It's available to everyone 24 hours a day. And whenever we're out hiking or kayaking or something like that, that we're just absorbing a part of the presence of God and the manifestation of God that shows us and demonstrates who he is. But then God comes along, according to John chapter 1, and he now pours himself not only in creation form, but he pours himself into personal form, in the person of Jesus. And all of a sudden, God becomes even more personable and relatable to each one of us. I mean, do you remember the language of the Apostle John over 1 John chapter 1? John said, so with him, we were able to see him. We were able to hear him. We were able to touch him. God all of a sudden became tangible in remarkable ways. Do you remember the first time someone tried to describe God to you? I don't know what they said to you, but here's basically what I was taught growing up. This is who God is, David. God is the one that created you. Check, got it. God is the one that loves you. Okay, check, got it. God is sitting on the throne. He rarely walks around, never goes for a run. He's always sitting on the throne. Really? Okay. And so what does he do on that throne? Well, he's making a list, and he's checking it twice. He's going to find out who's naughty and nice, right? How many of you actually were brought up with some sort of version of that? Most of us were. That's what God's up there going, I'm going to get them. I'm going to get them if they get out of line, right? Jesus actually shows up and says, that's not who God is. He's not some static being. The dynamic presence of God is exploding in all of creation. So who is God? Here's just the simple way I explain him to people these days. The one who is Father God for us. the one who is Jesus Christ alongside us, the one who is Holy Spirit within us. See, I just explained the mystery of the Trinity to you. Isn't that amazing? You've been confused all your life. Now, hopefully you can live with clarity. But see, who is God? The one who is for us. You will never in a million lifetimes have someone else that's more for you, that loves you, is committed to you, values you no matter what than him. That's who God is. He's also Jesus Christ, the one that comes alongside us, and the Holy Spirit that's within us. So in Jesus, what we see happen is this. The life presence, hang with me for just a moment, and I'll help you pull this together. The life presence or essence of God is now poured into a life personality. So the Spirit becomes flesh. The invisible presence of God now becomes visible in a human personality. And that's actually a great picture of what every single one of us look like. So Jesus comes along and he reveals what life is actually going to look like and be like. Not primarily for him, but for every single one of us. And then he comes alongside us to walk through the agony of life and to walk through the ecstasy of life in both of those dimensions. Now, there's a real paradox here. And the paradox is there's divine and there's human. And most of us, most of our lives, have been taught, it's been modeled for us, that these are like two separate things. Jesus comes and he unionizes both the divine and the human together. And you go, wait a minute, that's a complete contradiction. Yeah, divine, human, that is a paradox within itself. But guess what? Jesus comes to not only show us that was true of him, but to show us that it's true of us. You have the divine in you that's been there from day one, it's never left you, no matter how your life has gone. But you also have the human, right? So here's a simple way that, I explain it just in this diagram right here. Can we jump? There you go. So God's life essence or presence now becomes a human life personality. That was true in Jesus. That's true in us. So what's most true about us? Well, we are a perfect spiritual being having an imperfect human experience. That's what's going on. You go, well, those are complete contradictions. Yeah, it's a paradox. And Jesus says, now watch how I join the two together and walk that out, because I'm going to, check this out. Jesus says, I'm going to show you how to be human. How to live it in such a way that you're able to join both of those things together. Colossians chapter 1. It says, we look at the Son and we see God's original purpose in everything that's created. For everything got started in him, finds its purpose in him. He was there before any of it came into existence. And he holds it all together right up to this moment. So spacious is he, so roomy, that everything of God finds its proper place in him without crowding. I love this last part. Not only that, but all the broken and dislocated pieces of the universe, people and things, atoms, animals, get properly fixed and fit together in vibrant harmonies, all because of his death, his blood that was poured down from the cross. How many of you like jigsaw puzzles? Did you just raise your hand? Okay, a number of you. I don't. I don't get along with jigsaw puzzles. I never have. See, for me, when you have hundreds of pieces, in some cases several thousand different pieces, it just feels overwhelming to me. Feels confusing. I get disoriented, And I go, those things don't fit together, This is a cruel joke. They don't fit together. But those of you that are pros at jigsaw puzzles, you know what the secret is, don't you? What's the secret? You keep looking at the picture on the box. When you look at the picture on the box, you go, oh, okay, so that's where this piece fits. So you go back and it starts coming together. And then every time you start to lose hope or lose your sense of orientation, you go back and you look at the picture on the box. Jesus is the picture on the box in human form for every single one of us. To be able to understand the ecstasies of our life and to be able to understand and walk through the agonies of our life at the same time. So to me, a significant part of Jesus' life here on earth was to show us the blueprint. So, are you ready? I'm going to show you the blueprint. The blueprint starts right here. It starts with creation, as in being conceived. So, in the life of Jesus, Jesus is divinely conceived. We go, that's awesome. What a miracle. Yes, it is awesome. Yes, it's a miracle. However, I believe it's intended to also picture what is most true about you and I. You and I were divinely conceived. You go, well, wait a minute. There were two people involved versus Jesus. There's just one person involved. You know, with two people, it's still a complete honking miracle. You know, the parents, they are not conceiving. They're just participating in the process, okay? But think about this. I know we're in church, but forgive me if you're not used to me, but I'm going to take you back to Biology 101. So you do know, don't you, that you were only one of 1 million sperm. And there's only one egg. And there's a race to see who can get to the egg first. And you won. You won. Don't ever say again, I've never won anything in my life. Well, hang on. It turns out you've won the most significant race of all of life. And look at us, we're here today. But here's the miracle of it all to me. I never trained for that race. Neither did you. Someone got us from here to here. And that is a miracle. You have won when there's been a 1 in 1 million chance because of who was crafting it and who was behind it all. See, our DNA is divine. So this is a powerful metaphor for us. That's why I believe the gospel Jesus came, teaching, proclaiming, was the announcement of who God insists that you are, your real identity. You're a child of God because you literally came from God. And he's got all kinds of kids just like you and I. But then we move from creation, conception, where there's the big I am, to all of a sudden then we move in the second stage of construction. Construction is all about the growth and development that we pursue and experience. So we move from I am to I can, where we're trying to find our way, how to make our way in the world, where we'll get noticed, where we'll feel significant, where we feel safe and secure, and when we don't, we just further that construction project. So we see this with Jesus. Jesus lives an ordinary life the first 30 years, right? Those weren't throwaway years for Jesus. Jesus is showing us the blueprint of life. He goes through infancy, he goes through childhood, he goes through adolescence. He has a mom and dad. They're trying to give him a sense of identity and who they believe that he is. And they say, you're a Jew, you belong to this Jewish tribe, this Jewish family, you're also a carpenter. And for a while, that worked for Jesus until it didn't. But he went through the construction phase just like every one of us did. So this is where you and I leave the proverbial garden and our ego gets formed. You know, we're like little kids who try to separate themselves from their parents in order to discover who they are. That's why, you know, initially it's all about hugging, being near, and all of a sudden, less and less so. And now I want to see if I can walk on my own, if I can, run on my own, if I can eat on my own. And I move from I am to I can. Really important. We've got 18 grandchildren? 8. Oh, that's right. And it seems like 18. But anyway, we have a delightful time with them. And our youngest grandson, Judah, right now is 2.5. And, used to, he wouldn't let go of his mom. Now he has no problem letting go of his mom. I mean, he'll run off into traffic, okay? You got to watch him. And he'll run away from her when he's over to our house a lot. He'll just crawl up on top of the furniture, and he'll just dive head first, okay? He wants to say, I can't. This is who I am, even apart from you. I appreciate I've been a part of you, but now I need to prove something. I need to construct something that's going on. A couple of years ago, we had another grandson, Owen, who was like 3 at the time, and we were living in this small neighborhood, this little small street, and so I decided to take him driving one day. So I put him on my lap. I let him hold the steering wheel. I know some of you are going, isn't that dangerous? Yeah, but I did it anyway, okay? So I had my feet on the pedal, so I was going to try to control most of the experience. And after a few moments, he started steering straight into a fire hydrant. Well, typically that's not good, right? So I'm not going to allow that. So immediately I reach up, I put my hands on the wheel. And Owen screams at the top of his lung while he's there on my lap going, "Gee, Daddy, stop. I can do this. I don't need you." He said, "Don't need you. I can do this." Well, what he was trying to express was his sense of identity. That, hey, I got this on my own. I am my own person. We all go through that throughout the first 30, 35, 40 years of our life. All we're trying to do is we're trying to develop a persona, a mask, an image of ourselves in order to make our way in the world. And the good parts of it and the bad parts, God seems to just be comfortable with using all of it because he knows it's actually necessary for where we're going. Then we move into the third stage. We move from creation to construction to deconstruction. The misunderstanding, the failure, the suffering, and the death that can be a part of every single life. And all of a sudden we move from I am to I can to all of a sudden I can't. What used to work before, what I was counting on, who I was counting on, it's not working any longer. And that's where life tends to fall apart. So, again, we see this patterned and blueprinted for us in the life of Jesus. Long before the infamous weekend, for years leading up to it, Jesus was betrayed, he was abandoned, he suffered hostility from people. He suffered people insulting him. He suffered people walking away from him, including his own natural nuclear family. For a couple of years, it appears in Scripture. So this is long before the infamous weekend. Jesus is now going through deconstruction, okay? Certain things that worked before are no longer working. But what he does, I believe, is he identifies with our humanity at its lowest points, comes alongside us. Most of us believe that Jesus came primarily to die and be resurrected on our behalf. I don't think that's an inaccurate statement, but I think that is an incomplete statement. I believe Jesus, the first 32, 33 years of his life were not throwaway years. They came to show us the blueprint of life and how life is going to go. Over in John 12, Jesus said, "Unless a kernel of wheat falls in the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces life, even new life, even more seeds." Now, the real death that Jesus spoke of is the death of our ego, of our compulsive identity, of our sin, of our self-defeating behaviors. That's what Jesus said. You got to die to that. I know part of that has served you well now. It's not going to help you go the whole distance of the human experience. And so you and I have to let go of something in order to gain something even better. That's what's behind that. So God uses the construction phase to help get us started, but over time, it becomes the me that I constructed becomes like a prison. Have you ever felt that before? The persona, the me, a part of my life, while intending to do well and do good in the world, I end up building some sort of deal about who David Loveless is that eventually, so subtle you don't even know it. You wake up one day and you find yourself trapped inside your own prison walls that you've constructed. And what most of us tend to do, Christians alike, throughout our human life, is we seem to trying to improve the prison conditions instead of busting into freedom and getting out. So here's the deal. We experience the limitations of both ourselves and the limitations of other people. Up to this point, we've spent our whole life trying to gain and maintain control. I mean, I certainly did that. I spent most of my adult life trying to construct the me that I wanted to be. But earlier in my life was constructed around the me that others wanted me to be. Then I transitioned to the me that I want to be. Had no idea eventually you're going to fall into the loving arms where you and I end up becoming the me that God originally designed and created us to be. But something has to happen first. For me, I'd experienced the biggest kahuna of life for me. So, back a number of years ago, I deeply betrayed the sacred trust of my marriage with Crone, of my family, as well as thousands of other people. And overnight, because of my actions, we lost our job, we lost all of our income, we ended up losing our home, we lost most of our friends, we lost our spiritual community, we're not allowed to come back in, and we lost all of that because of my actions, but we lost all that. I can tell you, in that moment, I thought, this is it. I'm done. There's nowhere else to go in life. That's it. Life will never be good again. I've helped others get through stuff, but I think I'm just seeing the pain on a large number of people. I don't think that this is even solvable and doable again. We all have to go through some form of deconstruction. Sometimes it's like we choose that deconstruction, and other times it's like that deconstruction chooses us. Sometimes it comes in the form of misunderstanding, or opposition, or betrayal, or abandonment, or failure, or suffering, or a loss of someone. These are all things that Jesus went through before the cross. He didn't experience the agony finally on the cross. He had been experiencing agony as a perfect spiritual being having an imperfect human experience. Does that connect? Here's the deal. You and I, we have to die in order to rise. We have to lose in order to gain. We have to be defeated in one way or the other in order to win and to gain. And we have to become broken so that we can actually be set free from the very prison walls that we've been involved with. So often as well-meaning parents, we've all found ourselves at one time or another trying to protect our kids from what we went through, right? Those of you that are parents, you know what that's like. You go, hey, I suffered and I had to learn this the hard way and I had people do this to me and, I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to my kids. Well, you know what? That's great loving intent, but that's an incomplete picture of the human experience. All the stuff you've gone through in the past is what's made you who you are today. You would not be who you are today unless you would have gone through all of those things. So guess what? The same thing is true for every person that's ever lived. There has to be a death of something that's unnecessary, that feels very necessary in the moment, in one form or another. I mean, this is fascinating to me. Even nature goes through this, through creation, then construction, then deconstruction. Everything in nature dies, and then it's reborn, right? But it dies. Did you know in the human body, literally every moment, every day of our lives, cells are born and are created inside of us. They serve their purpose and then they die, okay? And they leave us, and then God gives us more. The only cells that refuse to die, you know what they're called? Cancer cells. That's where cancer comes from, is when cells refuse to die. I think that's a powerful metaphor for what is profoundly true on an even larger scale in each one of our lives. I mean, most people have the expectation, hey, if I do life well, it should be basically up and to the right? I'm going to hit a few speed bumps, there'll be a few dips into the valley, but I'll be okay. But if I'm just so totally devoted to Jesus, and I get all my moral ducks in a row, and I'm serving the world, and I'm doing the best I can, then you know what? Life is gradually going to get better and better and easier. And then all of a sudden, when it doesn't, we feel like God has abandoned us. We feel completely disoriented by the circumstances that have significantly shifted around us. I've come to believe that most Christians have been prepared for a crossless resurrection, and there is no such thing. Most Christians have been prepared for a crossless resurrection. I want to get resurrected without going through the cross. I'll be very honest with you. I thought for years that Jesus came to die so that I didn't have to. And it turns out I was wrong. What Jesus was doing, he was showing me a part of the blueprint of my life and of what was going to happen to me in one way or another. Could have been under completely other circumstances, but Jesus came to show me the way in all of that. That's why John 14, where Jesus says, I am the way, I am the way, I'm the blueprint, I'm the pattern. Follow this, because I'm going to lead you. I'm coming alongside you in every stage and every dimension of your life. I think this is the most difficult, yet one of the most profound parts of our human journey. Is right there. See, that's why I just don't buy the church line that the gospel is the announcement. Trust Jesus and life will go well. How many of you does that work for you? All right? Actually, a more accurate, I believe the proclamation of the gospel is this. Trust Jesus with your whole life. Many parts of life are going to well, but some parts are not going to go well, but you'll be fine. You will be fine. It'll seem like the biggest tragedy of your life. For Jesus' disciples, 3 days after the crucifixion, he hasn't resurrected yet, they still think it's a tragedy. They had no comprehension that the most tragic thing that happened in their lives was about to become the most terrific thing of their entire human experience. Just couldn't see it at the moment. I wish, when I was 13 years of age, my parents, who were amazing parents, very loving, very encouraging, they raised me in a small, little evangelical Christian church, and it was great. So much of that fed and helped form me in my construction phase. But I wish, when I was that age, someone would have sat me down and said, David, here is the blueprint of your life. Here is what you're going to go through, actually. This is actually how all reality looks and takes the form of. But you know what? Son, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Some days you're going to raise your hands like, yeah. And other days, you're going to be laid out flat on a floor, sobbing uncontrollably at either what you've done or what life has turned around and done to you. But the brilliance of God, the Father God who's for us, makes sure that we get through it. So for me, over in Romans 8:11, it says, when Jesus then moves into reconstruction, so let's move from creation to construction to deconstruction. Now we move into reconstruction. Reconstruction is the resurrection response that God demonstrates for all of us. Check this out. You and I, this is the blueprint. You and I move from I am to I can to I can't now. I've lost all control of life, it feels. To all of a sudden we move into he can. That's what transpires in reconstruction. Here Jesus becomes the risen Christ. This is where we're all headed, toward resurrection. I mean, the very things that all of us as humanoids fear the most, God goes, hey, I'm going to transform it all. I'm going to raise it all up. Romans 8:11 tells me this just didn't happen to Jesus and for Jesus. This happens to me. And if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of the spirit who lives in you. See, most of us have been led to believe that scriptures like that have to do with when I physically die and go to heaven. While I believe that's true, I believe it's just as profoundly pointing toward what our human experience is going to be like. And Jesus is going, hey, this is not only a historical fact about me that I got resurrected. I'm showing you the blueprint and the pattern. This is going to happen for you. You go, no way. There's no way. Almost 5 years ago, in fact, I went through 3 different episodes where I almost took my life. I had no hope. I had no hope. I was in complete despair. I had never felt that way ever in my life. I couldn't have conceived that one day, as in right now, my present moment, the most unbelievable resurrection has taken place. And reconstruction has taken place within my own soul, in my marriage with Crone, with our kids, with 2 out of 3 of my daughter-in-laws. So at least, we're on the winning side of that. And then with all the grandkids. I am blown away by what God has now been emerging and allowing me to be a part of and being a kingdom representative again. What's happening, ministering, investing in other people. I can't believe all the things he's done, just in the last 12 months. Crone and I the other day we were shaking our heads like, what has happened? But when you're going through deconstruction, it feels like that will never happen. True or false? And then hang on, baby. Here it comes. Here it comes. The most painful things that we don't like, seem like a tragedy, is going to be resurrected. Now, if everything gets resurrected, you need to know the nuance of that. Everything doesn't get resurrected in its former form. More often than not, it gets resurrected in a new form. It's part of the process God uses. Again, whether we were intentionally disobedient in something or someone else's disobedience impacted our lives. See, resurrection is about deconstruction and suffering not having the last word. Whatever suffering you've been through, whatever darkness you've walked through, whatever pain that you've experienced, whatever violence that you've experienced, whatever the betrayal is, resurrection says it doesn't have the last word. Resurrection, this is so great. Resurrection frees you to go, it was horrible. It was horrendous. It was a hell on earth that I experienced. You want to be able to name those things and fully feel those things. That's okay. Don't say, well, praise God, I'm in the victory, when your life is falling apart. Go, it hurts. It's hurt like hell. I'm so confused by this whole thing. It could be cancer, divorce, losing a house, losing a family member. You can say it was unjust, it was evil, it was a nightmare, and all those things are true. But it doesn't have the last word. That's resurrection. Someone should be doing cartwheels. Resurrection, reconstruction is also about transforming the pain instead of keeping the pain. Rest of your life and then transferring that pain to other people. So again, Jesus is the blueprint for this. Jesus absorbs all of it and he does something with it. On your way to church here today, I'm sure you weren't even aware of it, but you passed a number of what are called transformer boxes. Okay? And it's just real simple what happens. The most dangerous high voltage that's completely unusable and would kill you in a half a nanosecond goes into that transformer box. Then that transformer holds it and converts it into usable power. That's why we have lights on today. Before, that power wasn't available for that. It's because it got converted and it got transformed. So what does Jesus do? Jesus hangs on the cross and he absorbs all of the pain of death and he holds it in himself long enough. He then converts that death into life. But that just wasn't true for him. That is true for us because of his Spirit that's working within us. Last year, I was speaking at a church in California, and just before I got up to speak, they had a violin player that got up on stage and was performing. She was about 20. She was like the number 2 violin player in Romania, and I was just mesmerized. I mean, just the sound and the beauty, they just let it echo in that auditorium, and it was so life-giving. And then all of a sudden, I became fixated on the violin she was playing. And I said, Lord, what do you want to show me about that violin? And he showed me the same blueprint. He said, David, a tree was born, a tree lived, and then a tree died. And now it's been resurrected in a new form. And I thought, that's a singing tree. That wooden box? For crying out loud, how does God do that? Dude, you know what violin strings are made of? Goat gut. Goat gut. That means a goat was conceived, goat lived, then a goat died, and now he's been resurrected in a brand new form that brings healing to the world. Can I tell you, the same thing is true for you and for me. God is taking all of this pattern because he has a unique song that he wants to play through you and sing through you that will be so life-giving. And I'm also assuming that's already happening for a number of you. But it's because we don't just hold the pain forever or transfer that pain to others. We absorb it and we allow him to convert it from death into life. And then finally, there's completion. The final ascension home. This is represented in Jesus in Luke 24, and he ascended into heaven, okay? So now we come full circle, where Jesus returns to home, just like you and I return to home. So again, check this out. We move from I am to I can to I can't to he can, only he can, to all of a sudden we can. We're in this unbelievable partnership together. But it's because Jesus came to show us the way, the blueprint, the pattern of it all. Now, before we wrap it up here, can I tell you, I believe this picture is a picture of all of reality. All of creation goes through this. All of nature goes through this. Every person who has ever lived goes through this. I believe every marriage goes through this. I believe every organization, every business, every church, every ministry goes through it. That's why, as God kind of gave this to me, it became so very helpful to further understand my life's journey and why it's turning out the way that it is. So, here are a couple of ways you can apply this. Number one, determine which stage you're in. Some of you go, I think I'm in construction. Others of you, I'm in deconstruction for sure. Others of you go, I feel resurrected from it all, or it's like it's come full circle. And whatever God, initially birthed thought of, it's kind of come to completion. Identify which stage you're in. But also know, a quick nuance of this is you can be at the stage of construction in your personal life. You can be at the stage of deconstruction in your business life. Does that connect? You can be at one stage in your family. You can be at another stage in another role or dimension of your life. That's okay. But we all have a general sense and theme of what's currently going on in the stage. Second thing is this. If you're currently in what feels like a wonderful stage, enjoy. Revel in it. Don't feel guilty about it. Fully enjoy the beauty and the profound goodness of it. But don't hold on to it and become enslaved by it. You actually don't have to have everything go like that in order to be okay. But just know, this too will pass. The flip side is if you find yourself in a confusing, difficult stage, don't think it's going to last forever. I thought mine was going to last forever. I could see there was no light at the end of the proverbial tunnel, It's done. Listen, if you're in that kind of stage right now, know that it's not going to have the last word. You don't have to stay in it, but you do have to go through it. Let me hear the words of Psalmist David in Psalm 23. Even though I walk, you have to walk through the valley of shadow of death. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Jesus came to show us that where there seems to be no way, he makes a way every single time. So, next time when you wonder where this whole thing is going, this whole thing called life, where all history is going, you family's going, where you're going personally, all you have to do is every time you get disoriented or confused, look down at the picture on the box and see Jesus. And you go, oh, that's it. That's why he becomes the blueprint for us all. Let's pray. Oh, Spirit of the living God, I've never trusted you more in my entire life than what I do now. I'm just daily, I'm humbled by the things that you allow me to experience and what you do with it all. Lord, I pray for all my friends here this morning that if they're in the really great phase, Lord, help them to revel in it, not feel guilty about it. But Lord, help them not to become enslaved to it. Lord, for others that are going through very painful things in their personal lives right now, or in their family system, or in their business, I ask that you would remind them they don't have to become enslaved to that pain and suffering either, because it too will pass. God, thanks again for being so absolutely brilliant in this blueprint you provided us in human form, giving us exactly what we needed, the picture on the box. In Jesus' name.